Today we are going to do a dual battery setup in the back of this 2020 Jeep Wrangler JLU, and the goal is to get everything in this tub in the back here because it's a fairly useless space, or at least it is if you're loading down for a long off-road or overland trip, because you're not going to be able to get to anything that's in there without unloading everything in the back first. So I think it's a perfect spot for doing this dual battery setup, and I'm going to be using pretty much everything that you see in front of me. I'll put links in the description so you can easily find what I've used. Obviously, as with any project I do, I'm doing it for reasons that work for me. If you are doing your own, then you may just use this for ideas and customize it, do something a little different. As we go, I will go over each thing, why I chose it, as well as talk about some of the tools you'll need. Just right at the start, a couple of really useful tools to have is a large heavy-duty crimping tool and some kind of cutters to cut thick wire, some heavy-duty cutters. I have these little things. They're not great when you're trying to cut 6-gauge wire. For the batteries, I have gone with these. These are lithium iron phosphate batteries. They are much more energy dense and longer lasting than an AGM battery. In fact, if you're trying to do an AGM battery, I don't think you'd fit it in there. But I got two of them. These are 50 amp hours at 12.8 volts. So together we've got 100 amp hours, which is gonna be plenty to run a couple of heated blankets overnight or a heated blanket for a couple of nights. You could run a fridge for several days in hot weather using these. And I chose these ones purely for the size. So these are eco-worthy batteries. According to the specifications I was looking at on Amazon, these are the only ones that I could find that will actually fit in the tub, or at least the only 50 amp hour ones that I could find that would fit in the tub. Other than that, I don't know a whole lot about these batteries other than they do not have a good quality battery management system. One of the downsides to lithium batteries is you cannot charge them below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. A good quality lithium battery will have a battery management system in it that will cut it off and stop it from being charged below those temperatures. These ones don't. So if you don't have the right charger, these ones will get damaged at low temperatures. So my charger is this one from Redox. This is the BCDC 1225D. There are several reasons to pick this one, but one of them, the important ones, is that this has a built-in thermometer, so it will not charge these when the temperature is too low. A couple other reasons. One of them is, well, obviously the size of it. This thing is really compact, so it's going to fit nicely in the tub here, whereas several others are quite a bit larger and won't work as well. And another reason is that it's Redox. They are the best chargers that you can buy. And I realize that I've gone with, maybe the best charger that's available and some of the cheapest batteries. These two together were $400, I think. So let's get started running the wire from the starter battery to the tub at the back here. I've gone with 6-gauge wire for this. I think I've got 25 feet of each in this bag. 6-gauge is plenty for the 25 amp charger you've got here. If you had a much more powerful charger, which you're probably not since you've only got 100 amp hours of batteries here, then you'd maybe want a thicker gauge wire, but 6 is usually the minimum I'd go with for something like this. This is probably the most difficult part of the whole installation because you've got to figure out where this wire is going to go. You do have several options. The easiest is probably just to drop the wire at the bottom of the engine bay and run it along the frame to the back of the vehicle and just drill a hole in the bottom of the tub here. I'm not going to do that. I'm not a fan of running wires on the outside of vehicles because it's something that could get caught on branches. And there is also, even though it is shielded, there is the exhaust right underneath here. So I'm going to go through the vehicle and that's going to be very long and difficult to do because I've got to plan it out and I've got to pop a whole bunch of plastic panels out. According to Jeep, the way you should run wires from the engine bay to the inside of the vehicle is through the fender liner or through a spot behind the fender liner on the passenger side of the vehicle. But to do that, you have to take the entire fender liner out and you have to buy more plastic rivets to put it back in again. And I'm not about to do that. If you want to do it properly, be my guest. I'm instead going to use a lot more convenient access. There's a little plastic circle down here in the engine bay. It's about this big. Pop it out, I'm gonna drill a hole in it, run my wire through. When I'm done, I'll just put a little bit of sealant around it to stop dust from getting inside the vehicle. I'm gonna get on and do that, and then I'll probably show you the whole setup once I've figured it all out, because this is gonna take me some time. A 3/8 inch drill bit is the perfect size for 6-gauge wire. I drilled 2 holes for that since I'll be running my ground back to the starter battery rather than using a chassis ground somewhere else in the vehicle. If you're installing this in a JL, you'll also want to drill a 3rd, smaller hole to run a wire for the ignition sensor. The Jeep's probably the easiest vehicle I've run wires for because the firewall axis is really easy to get to. It's underneath the dash, just above the gas pedal. After running the wire through the firewall, I was able to pull it through the footwell, and I have tucked it up underneath the plastic trim here. And I actually didn't end up having to take this off because it was loose enough that I could just pull it out and tuck the wires in. And then all the way back behind the B-pillar. Same back through here, so I was able to tuck right underneath this plastic trim. It's underneath the carpet there, and then it does appear just underneath the seat before coming back into the back of the vehicle. And I've hid it underneath this. I took the whole thing out, all the screws down the side. It's a T40 Torx bolt. Took those out and ran the wire underneath it. And the end result is that the floor isn't perfectly flat. You can't quite tell on the camera, but I preferred it to just having the wire sitting on top or drilling any holes. Something else to consider is you could potentially ground on one of the seat bolts, either here or the one that is tucked away back there somewhere. I promise it exists even if it doesn't show up on camera, because it's a suitable enough ground point. But I didn't have a ring connector big enough for this. You'd need an 18mm socket if you want to take that out. And it's just a shorter ground run, a little bit easier. But since I was running all the way to the front through here anyway, I might as well run the negative directly to the battery. So this next stage is just going to be me laying stuff in here to get an idea of where I want everything to fit. And for now, I'm going to attach everything down using 3M Velcro pads because I want to be able to move it around and take it out as well if I need to. Let's say I forget to do something and I need to add another wire to one of these batteries. The Velcro is going to allow me to easily take it out, and that's the plan for now, and also probably for the next few weeks while I figure out where I want my outputs to go. But once I'm happy with it, I am going to run 1/4 inch Rivnuts in here, 1/4-20 Rivnuts, so I can just bolt everything down where I want it to be. Although to be honest, I think Velcro probably would do the job just because there's not a whole lot of space for it to move around. Like these batteries, when this lid is shut, I bungeed it up, but when this lid is shut, the batteries are not going anywhere, even with just Velcro holding them in. While you're running your charging cable and your ground cable, you will also want to include another one, a small wire, that is going to be for the ignition. Basically, it tells the Redox when your ignition is on. This only applies to the Jeep JL and any other vehicle that has a smart alternator. So if you've got an older vehicle, you don't need to do this. But because this has a smart alternator, when the starter battery is fully charged, the alternator will shut down or produce a low voltage, and normally the Redox would shut off as well. So this tells the Redox that the vehicle is running and it can keep pulling power for as long as it needs. This just needs to go into a fuse that has power when the ignition is on only. I've gone with F52 on here, which is the one for the cigarette lighter. I did just check that with the multimeter, so that one is only on when the ignition is on. Unfortunately, my fuse taps are only the large ones, and I do need a micro fuse tap, so I'm gonna have to order one of those. When you get yours, make sure you pick a fuse tap that has 2 fuse spaces. So you're gonna retain the 20 amp fuse there for your cigarette lighter, and then you'll want to put your own fuse in, probably a 5-10 amp fuse for the wire that is running through the vehicle. Now it is time to start connecting wires to the Redox system, and for that I'm going to be crimping, and I'm going to be using these are little butt connectors that came with the Redox system. And I know for some reason there's some controversy between soldering and crimping. I personally believe that crimping is the way to go. It provides a very strong connection, especially if you use the right tools to crimp with. I know there's the other side who say everything should be soldered. And the Redox system, the instructions actually say to crimp and then add a little bit of solder to each end. But you do whatever you want to do. So the very first thing that needs to be crimped on this is going to be the orange and the green wire. They're going to be crimped together. That basically sets the charging profile for this, and it tells this that it's charging lithium batteries. After that, it's the blue one, and that is going to connect to the wire that I've got here that runs all the way up to the fuse block at the front that is powered when the ignition's on. Now, I know I just went on a whole rant about how crimping is better than soldering, but I did actually solder these. These wires are so small that I actually feel like crimping couldn't get a good grip on them, so I soldered those ones. And then these two, the size was so dissimilar between the two that, again, I think soldering worked best for those ones. And I actually used these little cheat solder things. I saw these advertised on, I think on Facebook or something. So I picked these up. It's just, they stick to it, you heat it up, and it solders for you. It's just super simple. But for the larger wires, I'm definitely going to be crimping these. And we'll start off with this red one that comes from the starter battery. That is going to hook up to the red on here. So I just need to cut off a little bit of the cover on here and crimp those together. I need to make sure I have some heat shrink for that too. And from the negatives, I'm going to hook everything up to this negative bus bar. That way I can have a common ground there that's easy to hook everything into. So I have, I believe this is 8 gauge. So I've got an 8 gauge ring connector to go on here, 6 gauge ring connector to go on there, and just hook each of them in. And then I'll be using this as a ground for my outlets as well. So my inverter and the fuse block that I've got that's going up here. There are only 2 wires left on the Redox charger now. One of them is this yellow one, and that's used for solar. I'm not actually going to hook up any solar now, but if I did, this would go to the positive on the solar panel, and then the negative would go to our common ground that we've got here. So I'm going to leave that. The other one is the brown, and this is what hooks up to the battery terminals down here and charges the batteries. We need to put a fuse right on the end of this, so I'm going to put a little ring connector on there, and little fuse like this. This fuse is it's a Renogy fuse. Renogy actually make good stuff, but their customer service is truly awful, and I've had terrible experience with them. So if you end up buying any Renogy stuff like this, you know, low cost stuff, that way if it goes wrong, it's not too big of a deal. And make sure you buy from Amazon, because Amazon's customer service makes up for Renogy's atrocious customer service. And for now, I'm going to leave the fuse out of this, but when it is time to fuse this one takes a 40 amp fuse with the BCDC 1225, the 25 amp charger. If you've got a more powerful charger, then you'll probably need a bigger fuse. It's gotten to the stage where things are starting to come together now, so I have gone ahead and Velcroed a few of the things on the back on just to hold them in place. I didn't want to do anything permanent yet in case I run out of room, I need to move things around, but the Redox system's Velcroed on. The negative bus bar is Velcroed on, and I have Velcro already on the batteries, so I can just flip them down and stick them down. But it is time to use all of these little connectors that I have prepared with the remainder of my cables that I have to put stuff all together. I'm going to go ahead and I'll put this where the fuse goes, cover that up. That way if I accidentally knock anything, I'm not going to short it out. So now that the charging cable is ready, minus the fuse from the Redox system, the brown wire on the Redox system, that's going to hook up to one of the positive posts on the battery. And while I'm screwing that in, I will connect the other positive post using this little connector cable that I've got. So now on the other positive post, I need to hook up an output that is going to go to our positive bus bar here. It needs to go through a fuse. So I've prepared 2 of these, and they're going to go on this 100 amp fuse here. And just like the other fuse, I'm going to go ahead and take it out. That way nothing is hot, and I can mess around with this as much as I need to, and then drop the fuse in when I'm ready. All right, so now that the output bus bar and fuse are ready to go. I'm going to hook those into the system here, and you can see how really this 2 gauge is not ideal. There's not a lot of play and not a lot of room to work with in here, but I'll go ahead and hook that up here. So I need to take this out. So now that the positives are hooked up, it is time to hook up the negative posts. First one's easy, so I'm just going to screw this in over here. Yeah, being careful about where the other end of this goes, because I do have exposed positive posts here, and I obviously don't want to connect those together. And now that I'm hooking up the other negative post, I'm going to include this cable, which will go to the bus bar there, the negative bus bar. With everything in place, I rolled the batteries over to their final position and stuck them down with the Velcro pads. I then hooked up the ground cable to the negative bus bar, and I was done. So we are pretty much finished at this end. I put the 40 amp fuse in now, so the batteries are connected to the charger. The only thing I haven't done up this end is hook up my outputs. So the 100 amp fuse is not in, and the positive bus bar has nothing connected to it. And I'm not going to do that on video because everyone's outputs are going to be different. But for me, I have gone with just a really cheap inverter. This is actually one I had laying around from a previous vehicle. This is a 700 watt pure sine wave inverter, but it's nice and compact, and it should fit on the back of my drawer system behind the chairs there. And I can hook up some USBs, 120 volt outputs. And the other thing I'm going to hook up is this, which is a fuse block, and that allows me to have a bunch of 12 volt outputs. So I am going to hardwire my fridge to this. That way there's no chance of it coming out, because you know how those cigarette lighter adapters are. They're useless. And I'll be flat towing this Jeep, so I will have a wire going from this up to the front so that I can power my brake controller. The only other thing we have to do before this will start charging is hook up the starter battery. Up the front, I've finished connecting it to the battery through a 40 amp fuse, and the only other thing to do is figure out where this wire runs and zip tie it up, and then connect the fuse tap, which I can't do right now. 24 hours have passed since I did the install. I've taken the Jeep out for a drive. The batteries have charged up, and I know they're charged, or they are charging, because there's a light on there that says they are charging. But I'm not able to tell exactly how much they've charged, and when I start using them, I won't know what the state of discharge is. So something you might want to consider adding is a monitor. I didn't think there'd be enough room, but there is. I think you can find a space for them. One I'm considering is the Victron Energy Smart Shunt. I think it's pretty compact, pretty reliable, and you can connect to it with Bluetooth on your phone and check their app and see what it's up to. Another thing is the amount of 6 gauge wire. I ordered a 20-foot pack of it, and it really wasn't enough. I used all 20 feet going from the batteries here to the starter battery, which left me nothing else to wire all this up. Luckily I had some scraps left over, so I was able to get this finished, but I don't have anything to go to my inverter now or to my other outputs, so I had to order some more, and it's not very cost effective. So if you can find yourself a 25-foot roll, and then you can cut off that extra 5 feet, that would probably be a lot better option. So now I've only got a couple of things left to do to this. I have actually stripped out the carpet because I'm going to have a drawer system going in here, and then I've got to wire up my outputs, and I'm done. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a like, and if you want to see more Jeep content, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.